Everybody wants a Mercedes, until ownership gets real. Because buying a Mercedes can feel like a major upgrade at first. The badge, the styling, the interior, the technology, the image, it all makes you feel like you're stepping into a different class of car. And sometimes you are. But what no one tells you is that Mercedes ownership can go in two completely different directions. One direction feels refined, premium, and worth the money. The other feels like you bought a status symbol that slowly turns into a financial warning. And the difference usually comes down to one thing. Not whether you bought a Mercedes, but which kind of Mercedes you bought, why you bought it, and what kind of ownership reality came with it. So in this video, we're doing this in two halves. Welcome back to Realm of Speed. Because this is not a Mercedes hate video, this is a buy smart or regret it later video. If you're into honest car content without the dealership fantasy, subscribe to Realm of Speed. This channel is for people who want the real story before they spend real money. Part 1. Why buying a Mercedes can go wrong fast. Mercedes is incredibly good at making people feel like they've arrived. You don't just see a Mercedes as transportation. You see it as success, taste, comfort, a reward, a statement. And to be fair, that's part of why the brand is so powerful. The problem starts when that emotional pull becomes stronger than the practical thinking. Because once buyers get hooked on the idea of owning a Mercedes, they start making decisions they would never make with a more ordinary car. They stretch the budget. They ignore repair risk. They excuse sketchy service history. They overlook warning signs because the car still looks expensive. And that right there is one of the biggest things no one tells you before buying a Mercedes. This is one of the easiest brands to buy emotionally, and one of the easiest brands to regret financially if you do that. 2. The purchase price is only the beginning. A lot of first-time buyers think the hardest part is affording the car. It isn't. The hardest part is affording the car after you've bought it. Because with Mercedes, the sticker price is just the entry fee. After that, everything tends to cost more. Maintenance, repairs, labor, parts are more expensive. Tires are often more expensive. Insurance can be more expensive. And once the warranty is gone, even small problems can start feeling big very quickly. This is where a lot of people make the wrong comparison. They compare a used Mercedes to a brand new mainstream sedan or SUV and think, for the same money, I can drive something way nicer. And that might be true on day one. But the ownership curve is not the same. A used Mercedes may be priced like a bargain, but it can still behave like a premium German luxury car every time it needs attention. And that's the part that catches people off guard. 3. A cheap Mercedes is often the expensive Mercedes. If there's one line in this whole script that matters most, it's this. The cheapest Mercedes to buy is often the most expensive Mercedes to own. That sounds backwards until you've seen it happen. A used Mercedes drops in price, and suddenly it looks accessible. Now, people who couldn't comfortably afford it when it was newer start shopping it based on badge value instead of ownership reality. And that is where problems begin. Because depreciation can make a Mercedes look affordable long before it becomes safe to own on a tight budget. That's the illusion. The first owner absorbed the major depreciation. You inherit the age, the wear, the complexity, and sometimes the maintenance backlog. So when people say, why buy a loaded Accord when I can buy a Mercedes for the same money? The real answer is, because the Mercedes may have been discounted by the market, but not by the repair shop. 4. Not all Mercedes are equal. This is where casual buyers get burned the hardest. They say, I'm buying a Mercedes, as if every Mercedes is basically the same experience with a different body shape. It doesn't work like that. Some Mercedes are relatively smart, balanced, well-rounded buys. Others are expensive traps with more complexity than most owners are prepared for. And buyers who don't understand that difference usually shop based on the wrong things. They shop based on the badge, the body style, the trim name, the horsepower, the monthly payment, how impressive it looks in photos. But they don't shop based on how reliable that model family tends to be, whether that specific example was maintained correctly, how expensive common repairs can get, how much complexity they're really taking on, whether the car matches their actual budget. That disconnect is where regret lives. 5. Luxury tech becomes luxury risk. Modern Mercedes interiors are incredibly convincing. You get inside one, and it feels special. Big screens, ambient lighting, driver assist features, digital clusters, power everything, cameras, sensors, premium materials. That whole feeling of being in something advanced. And when it all works, it's fantastic. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Every luxury feature is also one more thing that can age, fail, glitch, or become expensive to diagnose. A lot of buyers look at used Mercedes this way. More features for less money must mean better value. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it means you're buying more future problems for today's discount. That doesn't mean tech-heavy cars are automatically bad. It means buyers need to stop thinking of all those features as free extras. Outside warranty, those features become ownership responsibility. And that matters a lot more than people think when they're falling in love with the cabin at the dealership or in the seller's photos. 6. Neglect hits luxury cars harder. A neglected mainstream car might become annoying. A neglected Mercedes can become punishing. That's because luxury cars tend to be less forgiving when maintenance gets delayed, skipped, or done cheaply. And once Mercedes models fall into lower price brackets, they often get passed from owner to owner with decreasing levels of care. That's how perfectly good cars turn into disaster stories. One owner delays service, another owner chooses the cheapest fix, another ignores warning lights, another patches it just enough to sell it. Then somebody new comes along, sees a clean body, a nice interior, a famous badge, and thinks they found a deal. What they actually found was a bill that hasn't arrived yet. That's why two Mercedes from the same model family can produce completely different ownership experiences. The difference isn't always the badge, it's the history. 7. The image can trick people into buying the wrong life. This part matters more than most buyers want to admit. A lot of people don't just want a Mercedes, they want what a Mercedes says about them. And once image starts driving the purchase, rational thinking gets weaker. People stretch to buy a car that fits the identity they want, not the reality they can sustain. And that usually ends the same way. The car impresses people for a moment, then the bills show up. Then the excitement fades. Then the owner starts realizing that looking successful and comfortably owning a luxury car are not the same thing. And that's the problem. A Mercedes is a great car for the right owner, but it can be a terrible car for someone buying a lifestyle they can't actually support. Part 2. The smart side. Which Mercedes makes sense? Now, here's the part most people skip. Not every Mercedes is a bad idea. In fact, if you want one, and you're willing to buy carefully, there is one Mercedes model family that keeps coming up as the smart answer, the E-Class. If you want a Mercedes that actually makes sense for a lot of buyers, the E-Class is usually the family people point to first. And there are good reasons for that. The E-Class has long had a reputation for being one of the most balanced Mercedes products. Comfortable, refined, practical, and more convincing as a real ownership choice than a pure image purchase. Buyer guides regularly point to the E-Class as a benchmark sedan, and reliability-oriented write-ups often single out older E-Class diesel variants like the E220 CDI as especially sensible within the brand. That doesn't mean every E-Class is automatically a good buy. It means the model family itself has a stronger reputation as a smart place to start than a lot of flashier or riskier Mercedes choices. And honestly, that fits the E-Class perfectly. Because the E-Class has always lived in that sweet spot where Mercedes feels like Mercedes without necessarily becoming a full-blown badge flex purchase. You get the comfort, you get the road presence, you get the premium cabin feel, you get the long-distance cruiser personality that Mercedes has always done so well. But you also get something else that matters a lot: a reputation for being a more grounded Mercedes choice. Not the cheapest-looking option, not the most dramatic option, not the one people buy just to make a statement. And that's exactly why it's the one worth talking about. Why the E-Class works better than people expect. The E-Class tends to appeal to buyers who actually want to live with the car, not just be seen in it. That's a big difference, because the smartest Mercedes purchases usually happen when buyers stop asking, "Which one looks the most impressive?" and start asking, "Which one is most likely to make sense 6 months from now?" That is where the E-Class starts winning. It has the image, but it doesn't rely entirely on the image. It has the luxury feel, but it also has a reputation for being one of the more sensible Mercedes families to own if you choose carefully. It feels like a car bought by somebody who wanted the Mercedes experience and still remembered they had to live with the consequences. And that matters. If you're determined to buy a Mercedes and want one model family that most consistently makes sense, it's usually the E-Class. Not because it's perfect, and not because every example is safe, but because it has one of the strongest reputations for combining luxury, comfort, practicality, and a more sensible ownership profile than a lot of the brand's more image-driven choices. The warning that has to come right after. And this part is non-negotiable. A better Mercedes model family does not cancel out bad ownership history. A good E-Class can still be a terrible buy if it's been neglected, abused, poorly repaired, or bought by someone who treated a luxury car like a disposable car. That's why the usual used car rules matter even more here. Complete service history, strong maintenance records, evidence the car was cared for consistently, pre-purchase inspection, realistic repair budget, avoiding the cheapest example just because it feels like a deal. Pre-owned Mercedes advice consistently stresses that inspection and service history are the biggest difference between a smart buy and an expensive surprise, especially once you're outside warranty. Auto Web Expo. Who the E-Class is actually for. The E-Class makes the most sense for buyers who want real Mercedes comfort, a mature luxury experience, something more practical than flashy, a car that feels premium without screaming for attention, a better shot at making a smart purchase inside the brand. In other words, this is the entry-level Mercedes suggestion in this video. Not because it's the cheapest way into the badge, but because it's one of the smartest ways into the brand's core experience. And that's a big distinction. The cheapest Mercedes and the smartest Mercedes are rarely the same thing. If you want a Mercedes just because the logo makes you feel successful, you're already at risk of making the wrong decision. But if you want one because you understand what you're getting into, you're willing to do the homework, and you pick a model family with a more grounded reputation, especially something like the E-Class, then the experience can make a lot more sense. So don't buy the badge. Don't buy the fantasy. Don't buy the cheapest example you can find. Buy the right car with the right history for the right reasons. Because with Mercedes, the smartest move isn't getting into one. It's knowing which one is actually worth getting into. If you want more honest car content like this, where the hype stops and the real ownership conversation starts, subscribe to Realm of Speed. That's what this channel is built for.